let's talk about bank reconciliation. This is one of the most important, it maybe is the most important thing to make sure you do every month. Actually, it is the most important thing you make sure you do every month. What this does, if you remember, nowadays we don't really have the paper, little bank registry book, that you would have with we don't have that. But when you would have that, those of you who did, you would get your bank statement, right? And you would mark what came in and you'd highlight it off the statement. And it was important because you knew what money you still had to use. You didn't just guess, right? Same here. If you don't, now the program isn't going to just explode and catch on fire and everything is just going to, get flipped upside down because you didn't get to do your bank reconciliation that month. However, you don't know if you're in balance, or maybe you've missed an auto draw or something like that unless you do this. So this shouldn't be an optional thing for the month. If I was to choose one or two things to not do at the end of the month for whatever the reason, or the first of the next month for the prior month, that would be to close my period. I wouldn't choose this as the option. Because if you print your bank statement, well, let's use this. This is a little extreme scenario, but let's just use it. If you print your balance sheet for the end of the month, so we're going to print it for the end of October of 22. We'll just leave it at that. And I print my balance sheet, and I'm like, I'm good. This is exactly what we have in our bank. But I open up the bank reconciliation, and I clear over everything that the bank says I have. And up there in the top corner where it says $127,477.77 in yellow, it tells me otherwise, right? It tells me I'm off by that amount. So you didn't balance with your bank. Your goal should always be to hit zero there. So if you notice, up here in the top, let me use my arrow here. You have your current balance. This is what the CDM has as of the last entry in the system. This is what you said your statement said you had. You got a problem, right? Now, that's an extreme case, but it's a great example as to why, if you did this every month, you catch it right away. Because this also will carry, if we add another month to this asset, I'm going to start off $127,000. And so if I balance, and I've cleared everything that my bank says, and my bank says my total cleared is this, and I know I'm right, and my bank statement said my ending month is this, up to $12,000, then every month I'm going to be off $127,000. Okay? Now, that being said, if you are this, and let's say you've been off the same amount for a long time, and every single month you always have your total cleared right and your statement balance right, that means you've actually balanced with your bank. You cleared everything over that the bank says you had and all of that. Chances are at that point you have a beginning balance issue. You actually put in the wrong amount for that start date. Remember that January 1 of 22? So if we were to look back and see that every month was 120, the exact amount every time, and we can't seem to find wherever it was ever right, but every month it is in what I would call a true balance. That means the bank, when it says these total debits and other credits, or or debits and other withdrawals, and credits and other deposits or whatever, those totals, if that matches what I've cleared and I didn't have a typo for 1 month, then I have a beginning balance issue. But again, beginning balance issue or not, you're printing balance sheets with that $123,000 figure. You see why I would say this is just not even an optional thing to skip every month? This is why. Our most important job, if you do the books, the most important job is to make sure your cash is right. That's it. You're keeping the finances for your state, you know? And we do things with excellence. We got to make sure it's right. If that means I skipped doing some cleanup work that I wanted to do, but I just didn't have time to do the bank rec, I really want to get this cleaned up. Make time to do the bank rec. Do that every month. And here's why. I'm always at balance. I'll be okay. I mean, I'm not telling you it's like a rule, a law. Should be, but it's, you know what I mean? It's not going to catch on fire and explode. But what I am saying is, if you have, in day and age now, we have a lot of auto draws, right? We pay a lot of our bills online. And I don't know, maybe you guys have never ever had this happen. I know one place did, several do actually. They go, they print everything, they're definitely not in balance. And what we find out is they didn't put in the auto draws. They did some, but there were some that they, paid online. They didn't come in and put it into CDM. Well, now you're saying you got this much money, but really you don't, because you paid this bill and this bill online and you didn't put it into the system. Best thing to help you not get that problem is to, when you pay it online and you get that receipt, print it and put it with your bills. Put it with your bills. Don't put it in CDM and go online and pay it. You can pay it, print the receipt, put it with your bills. When you get the email that says, the auto draw is taking place, print the email, put it with your bills. So then when you go to do your bills, which we'll do payables next, when you go to do your bills, it's in there. You can pop it in there, mark it as an auto draw, so you print your piece of paper. Now you have a check. And for us, it's proving that I put it in the system. I staple it to my receipt and file it away. And you know how the one state knew that they didn't do it? Like, she was brand new. For the month, all of her auto draws didn't get put in. And you know how she found out? She filed things and looked and didn't have that check there. So we got digging even more and found she didn't put them in. So if you do it and you mark it as auto draw and you print the paper check, staple it to it, you can at least rule it out and say, no, I printed the check, because look, I got it right here. So you see, it's just another way to make sure you have it, because it's going to happen. You're going to forget. We're human. We're not perfect, right? I mean, it happens, right? And I mean, to the point, for the longest, I was taught it was almost like it was the devil to have them auto draw things. I know why she taught me that. That and her other thing was archiving. I don't know why, but I don't know why initially that she would taught me with. It was just, you write a check for everything. And it didn't make sense. I'm like, just do auto draw, just pop it in. When I took that call, it all clicked. I was like, that's why. She knew we were human. She knew mistakes happen and emails don't always get to us. And maybe we missed an electric payment because they didn't get the email to the receipt. It happens. But when it happens, if you do your bank rec every month, you'll see it. You'll catch it right then, and then you can put it in. Or everybody who orders on Amazon and they don't give you that Amazon receipt. Yeah, and they use the bank account instead of the credit card, and Amazon breaks things down. So much fun. I'm like, guys, use the credit card if anything. It helps save me for Amazon. So that's why this is super important. Well, how does it work? What do? Well, we'll just start with what we have here. So you have this. You click Add down here to add a new month. This is going to bring up, okay, well, what asset are you using? Well, I've kind of already had it checked, but you could change it if you accidentally clicked it and you meant to do your other one, like your savings account or money market or something. Your start date is always the day after the last day of that prior month. So, for example, the last bank reconciliation date range was October 1 to October 31. So the start date's November 1st. Anybody ever have the bank consistently on the exact last day of the month being their ending date? As I don't. Sometimes it's the 28th, sometimes it's the 30th, so it's changed. Make sure when you put your end date in that you're putting your end date for exactly what your bank says your end date is, and I promise you it does make a difference in balancing. Because I've seen it by one day, it threw things off, they couldn't balance, we couldn't find it anywhere. Change that date, right away balanced. How that works, don't ask me. I just know it did. I was thanking God because I couldn't figure that one out. And like, this is my baby. In fact, when I started CDM for accounting, this is how I learned it. Not doing it, I'd get called in the office. Anybody who knows Barbara Henderson knows she can be a little bit of a spitfire. And so I got called, my phone rang. Jennifer, come here. Okay. So I walk over there, and she had that look, you know? And I would say, what's wrong? I can't balance. I'm like, what? Like, okay, with what? No joke. Never seen this window in my life. I didn't even know this existed in CDM because at that time, I did data entry. I was young. I was like 18 or something at that time, maybe 19, maybe. You know, and she was like, "What's this bank statement?" As if I knew, you know? And I'm like, okay. She's like, I have gone through it. I have spent 2 days with it. I'm done with it. Fix it. And I was like, okay. Walked to my office. Terry, I need help. What is this? And I called support. He was he helped me. So I learned accounting by troubleshooting. You'd figure out that anytime she couldn't balance, I got to call. Something else happened, she'd call me to troubleshoot. I'm like, dude, I don't know this. But it's actually really cool to learn it by troubleshooting before doing it, because then after that, then I started doing it. And now I love finding needle in a haystack, and I love troubleshooting bank recs in some weird way. But I think it's because this is how I learned the program, It's some twisted thing, I guess, in my head. But one of the big things is the date, end date. Make sure it matches. So if I did this for 29, 22, when I do another one, what's my next bank statement going to start with? November 30th. Okay? Ending balance, on your bank statement, it says statement ending balance, but you also have statement beginning balance. You want to use the statement ending balance, whatever it says. We'll say it says this. Okay? Then we click OK. Now, what this is going to do, this is going to create a new month. And it's going to give me, let me do one thing. It's going to give me all of the entries that have not been cleared on a bank reconciliation up until November 29th of 22. Okay? On this left side here are uncleared items. So they have not been marked that they are on your bank, that they've hit your bank. If something has cleared your bank, so let's just say this one in September did, you highlight it. If you double click it, it goes right over. Watch how this changes. Let's do a big one. See? It's adjusting this as we go. So you highlight it, pen it, whatever you do on your bank statement, double click it and clear it over, and then keep going. When you've got everything on your statement done, you should have it all over there, and you should be at 0. And you go on through. Default order is all your deposits, then all your auto draws, and then checks in check number order. The red just means there is a gap in the check numbers, right? Just like your bank puts that asterisk, because that's what this is. It's just telling you there's a gap here, and we're aware of it. And then you just go through, click over as I go. If you have more than one, you can do this, hold your shift button down, and click and drag those over there. Okay? There are these two buttons here, show voided items. By default, they're hidden. But if I click this, it's going to show them. And if you scroll, because clearly there's one right here. See how there's a little asterisk right here? That tells you it's a voided item. Can you see it? Let me zoom really close. That right there. If you see a dot on your bank reconciliation, that's a voided item. That being said, if that voided item is not zero on both sides, then you need to go find the offset and clear them both. Okay? If the offset's in a future, which you guys wouldn't really run into this as much, but you want your voids to be in balance when you clear them. So if you're going to clear check number 1110, because, well, it says it's checked, or it says it cleared. So if you're going to do that, but it won't balance your bank here, but it was a voided check, right? And so if I do that, notice right here, this minus voids section should always balance. Because what this is telling me, I've only cleared one-sided of that voided entry. So I've incorrectly balanced my checkbook. Does that make sense? If it's zero, obviously you can clear it because your minus voids will stay at zero. Any questions so far? It's not hard to do. It's not, but it's just so important. Show future, if you have something that, was done in the future. And like, you know how sometimes you have a deposit, you put it in for the 30th, but the bank cleared it for the next day, or you put it for the 1st, the bank cleared it for the day prior. You can hit show future, and it will give you anything after, like this right here for December. See? So it'll give you anything after that date. We have it by default, those hidden, just because it's just less busyness on your screen. But you can have those shown. If you need to if you have your bank charges, you can go right here to this bank charge. You do not have to leave this window any longer for anything. And I'm going to show you. If you have bank charges, you can click this tab, click add, put in the account number for that charge, monthly bank fee. That automatically created a ledger entry for you. So you don't have to go out and do the ledger entry. The only thing with that, and I want to say it this way, there are times where, like Amazon, I don't know, you're going to put that, it's just you missed it, or you're not a draw. You missed putting in the electric bill. If you put it in here, yes, you're going to balance, your books are going to be fine, and all of that, but it doesn't connect to a vendor doing it this way. It's just creating a ledger entry for you. Does that make sense? And it'll create it, I believe it's for the last date, so the 29th. So you just want to keep that in mind when using your charges and interest. If you need it connected to a vendor, you probably don't want to do it through this. Interest is the same thing. You can just click add, type in, and do it that way. Shouldn't have hit tab. Okay? Now, I did forget to put the electric bill in. I need to put that in. I need to go out to the ledger entry, right? Not anymore. You're on 12.1 at least. You can use these right here. What happens, I think I have to save, but let's just see. If I do check, yeah, I got to save. It's going to open up the ledger entry window inside the bank reconciliation window for you. So you don't have to go out to the ledger entry if you don't want to. You can, but you don't have to anymore. And when we're done being patient, I am going to show you while we're waiting for this to save. There is a way you can import your bank reconciliation or your bank statement from your bank and have us do, it just does it. There are things about that, and we'll talk a little bit about it. I cannot display it. I don't have a file. You have to have that file from your bank. So obviously, I don't have that. We're working on getting like a video that kind of shows. It's not hard, but it's really cool. And we'll talk about that as soon as I show you how to add this. I'll show you how that works. So notice it opened up the ledger entry window inside my bank reconciliation. So I can type in, let's hope there's one that says electric, and then I can put in my amount. Wouldn't that be nice if it was that much? And save it. I don't have to leave my window. Okay. And then, where did it go? Any questions? I dated that for the 2023. But it does automatically clear it, though. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if anybody else has this, but my bank rec lists the auto draws as a separate amount from my checks that cleared. So if I'm ever off, I have to go through and actually total them separate to see which one is off.
Oh, your bank statement says that?
Like
Oh.
the bank statement has the auto draws as a separate number from checks.
Okay.
So, and maybe this is for future, is it possible to have
Type.
cleared, like have the types listed down there as opposed to just total cleared?
I can certainly ask. So it doesn't have a section that gives you, because ours will say total withdrawals and other like debits. It doesn't do that. Ah, I'll definitely put a story for that. I see what you're saying.
So like, I saw the line down there for like voided, it would be really nice to have those broken out separate so that you know exactly how many checks cleared.
Yeah. So what she's saying is on her bank statement, it doesn't total the auto draws and the checks together for the total withdrawals. So she has to do it. And so when she's going to try to this total cleared over here on the credit side, she's got to make sure she has those added correctly. And the question is, could we do an enhancement basically that separates it so you by type, like auto draws or checks and stuff like that? I can certainly put up a story for it and just let them know by type. So that they can maybe look at doing that as a future enhancement for sure. I mean, it makes sense if banks aren't doing that with it. But when you create the entry while you're inside this bank reconciliation window, you don't have to go find it. It automatically clears it for you. So again, time saver. Do you have to do it this way? Nope. You can make a list, go to your ledger entry, put all of them down in there, come back to your bank rec, find them, clear them all over, have at it. You absolutely can. This is just a newer enhancement that we've just done in the last couple of years that I just think it's really cool for that. And you can do that for anything. If you need to go see the ledger entry, you can click this. Because of the speed of things, we're not going to click that, but when you click that, it opens up the ledger entry for that particular line item that I have selected. Another enhancement that they have added, which I really love, is this reference number section. So if you're looking at an auto draw or something like that and you're like, what is that for? One, you can click it and it tells you who it's for, who it was written to and stuff. If I had the other one clicked, it would. But you can also go out to the ledger and do a search by that reference number if needed. You can also use the ledger entry button. There's just multiple ways. And why do they do that? Because when I'm out of balance and I can't figure it out, these are different ways to search. So I told you when we started accounting that I want to teach you not just how to do things, but how do I fix something? If I'm out of balance, one, we will not be able to get this in balance. I can tell you that right now. Who knows what's all in this database? But if I'm out of balance, here's what I always look at first. Is my statement balance matching the statement ending balance, and I didn't just miskey something? Are my total cleared debits and credits not list total, not this, this? Does that match what the bank says? If that doesn't, which it won't, unless it's a beginning balance issue, which it probably isn't, then you at least know I'm missing a deposit or I'm missing a check. So that's why I start there. You ruled out a typo. Check your date. So you've ruled those out. Now I know I'm missing something. So you go back through. What did I miss? I have all my checks. I have all my auto draws. I have all of that. You're missing something, right? You can tell me till you're blue in the face, I have it all. Definitely missing something. That doesn't necessarily mean you're missing a line item. Anybody have checks printed and they are on the wrong check number and you didn't catch it until you go to do your bank statement and check number, 1109 was actually for $500, not $76, and check number 1120 was the one that was for, $76 and not $500, and I'm just going through the bank statement, clearing check numbers. It happens. I see head smiling and nodding. Yeah. So then what would your next step be? You kept going through, you've got all those check numbers. Do it by amount. Do it by amount. You will find it at that point. I can guarantee you. If you're still off, go to the prior month and make sure you were balanced in the prior month, which chances are you were, or else you would have been panicking at that month. But it does carry over. Most 99.9% of the time, those issues right there will fix it. The other things that can be, they're just very rare, are things like the minus voids, not being in balance, stuff like that. Okay, any questions on that? Yeah.
If you add your interest in this window and you want to print that report, can you print this?
Okay, so the question is, if I add interest in this window and I want to print the report, can I print it from here? Are you talking the report for that entry you added or just for the bank itself? So yeah, good question. If you click on, you cannot technically add or print the like a trial balance or something that looks like the interest that you added. You can't do that from this window. But if you do click print, which brings us to this, you will see, if you want to show uncleared items, show voided, I do recommend putting those in there. You can see what you've added on here, but it won't have the ledger entry to it. It's just showing you that you've added it. But because it'll list it right here. So you kind of get that list there. But this is the bank reconciliation report. How do you balance with your bank statement, or your balance sheet, I mean? So we're thinking end of month stuff, right? So November 29th is that. I'm going to print my balance sheet for November 29th to match my bank, okay? When I do that, I'm going to look at what my checking account asset is that I'm working on here. I got that figure, right? That I need to match with my bank. So what do you do? How do you do that? So you take your statement ending balance and you add and subtract your total uncleared items as of November 29th. Why not as of the afterwards? Anybody want to give a guess? Because my balance sheet is for what? The 29th, or am I running a current balance sheet? I'm running it for the 29th. So I'm trying to balance the end of the month. So I print the balance sheet as of that. So I have total uncleared items as of November 29th. When I take my statement ending balance, add and subtract these, that figure should match my balance sheet for November 29th. If I'm running a current balance sheet and I do have selected, like I was just showing you here, the uncleared items after statement date and voided items, then I can take the add and subtract, where am I at here? Add and subtract the November 29th, but then also add and subtract the stuff between November 29th and the last entry in the system. That will match your current balance sheet. Any questions on that? I'm balancing it. Are you all with me, or have I lost you? It's quiet in there. So that's how you know you'd be in balance, okay? And that should match everything. If you don't show your voided items, you will struggle to balance for obvious reasons. You just don't have, you're missing line items for your calculations for both sides, remember? So I'm done with my bank reconciliation. I've balanced. Oh, let me show you importing. We can't obviously do it, but when you click import, let me go to, so I get it right on here. When you click import, on your bank website, you should be able to download a CSV file for your statements, okay? If you can't, that's a question for your bank, but if you can get a CSV file for your bank, when you click on import, it's going to say, all right, where's the file? So then you want to find the CSV file. That file then, it's going to, man, I wonder, I don't think I've got any, I was looking for that later, nothing. So that file then, it's like Excel. Those of you who work with Excel, you have the columns, right? Well, the bank's terms and our terms are very different in a lot of ways. And so when it's going to pop up this window and it wants you to map it. So in other words, which of these columns from your bank, which of them is the amount? Which of them would be the credit? Which of these, like you can see it and say, this date, okay, this is the transaction date that the bank has, that's the transaction date. The description thing that maybe your bank has and it's called written or something, you can say, this is my written to. Or the debits and the credits and so on. When you get all of it mapped so that CDM knows this column, I need to look here for the date and so on, you click OK, it is almost instant. It goes, if it can find a match, not by just transaction date, but transaction date, if it's a check, it's the check number and the amount. If it can match it, it instantly clears it over for you automatically. And then you have this other window at the top that gives you the things in that haven't been cleared over. They couldn't quite get a match. You can either click those and find it and manually match it yourself, or you can go on through and do your bank rate. So it saves you a lot of time if you have a lot of checks, as long as it can match the transaction date, the check number, and the amount, it'll go. Okay? It's a fairly new, it's been there, but it's not been pushed very much. So it's fairly new in a sense for that. And some of it is because it was hard to get those files from your banks. Like my bank for our church, it is not pretty. It doesn't work. One day they'll update it, but they do not provide me a file at all worth even messing with. So I can't do it. I'm sure if I called them, they could send me something, but at that point I might as well do it and I'd be done by the time I did it all. You know what I mean? So, but it does, I did it, I tried it once, I think I got it, and I did it with a lady, she could do it, her bank had a great one. And when I say instant, when I clicked OK, it was just done. I like blinked, I'm like, what just happened? I mean, it was the first time I had done it, and I'm like, so what did it do? And like all this stuff was cleared, and some of these like auto draws, and it's because she didn't have them in the system right. Like it worked, but some banks just can't provide that all the time. they'll get there someday. So when you're done with the bank reconciliation and you get everything at zero, you're done as far as with the month. You know you've balanced, right? We're good. So you print your reports. We'll touch on reports here in a little bit. But you print your reports. There is no right or wrong set of reports to print. It is per what your overseer would like to see. Usually new overseers, we would give them a few different ones and say, here's what we normally print. Here are a couple extra if you need it. Or here's what we normally print. If there's something in here that you're like, I need more information, let me show you some other reports. You know what I mean? So there are some that give a ton, there are some that don't, and so on. So you print your reports, then you close your period. You know, it's super hard to close your period. I'll show you. Hopefully you caught the sarcasm in that one. So you go to program accounting, close open periods. This is going to give you the list of all of your years that you had in the system. Now, notice I have January 2020 says closed, right? January of 21 says open. Remember back when we talked about how important it is to not change the date in the bank or beginning balances? Remember that? If I was to have gone in and changed that to 23, what we would see is January of 2020 and then January of 2023. 21 and 22, gone. If you ever look at your close open periods and you're missing a year, that's why. There's no other reason why a year is missing at all. People would almost try to argue with me that they don't even know what the beginning balance window looks like. And I'm just like, okay, well, let me show you. Let's change it to what it should be, and then we'll be okay. Like, it's just not worth arguing. But that's the only reason those years can be changed, okay? If you have something dated for the year 3000, what do you think happens? I can tell you, your program's going to crash because it tries to create over 1,000 years in there. It's fun. So you click on your open period. See these buttons here that say close this period? You simply select your month. Do you want to close this period? Yes. Print it. This is your closing report, and I'll show you what it looks like. Look at your closing report. Make sure it's right. Not that you can't open it again, but go ahead and close it. Here's your closeout report. Looks just like an account balances report. So it gives you what you started the month with, the debits and credits, and what you ended the month with for all of the account numbers in your system. Okay? All of them. We did a lot of work in 21. But it shows all that. When you're done, because I got to do it anyways, what happens if you go in, you've just started these books, they haven't closed their years in since the beginning of time. You can't close multiple years at once, but you can close multiple months. So you can go into 21. Notice how they all say close period. So I can show you the year. You hit close this period. It's going to close that one and all of the periods before it for me within that year. Then when all of your years are closed, or all of your months are closed, the button that says close this year will become visible. And now I can close it. Okay? If I need to open a year, I simply highlight this and open the year would become available. This database there's not really anything in there. You know what I mean? Any questions? I know it's really hard, but let me explain what happens though when you close the year. It's a little more than just freezing it. It takes those beginning balance figures that we saw for January of 21. Then it looks at all the ledger entries that were done within that year, and it gives you a new beginning balance for January of 22. And that date in your beginning balance will say January of 1 of 22. For the risk of potentially it taking a while to close the year with the speed, we're not going to do that. So I'm just going to explain to you how it does it, because it does take a minute. But the report looks the same. It's just the year instead of just 1 month. Okay? And you're done with the month. Obviously, if you have to do your journal entries, like you did like the month journal entries for certain things, you do those before you close. You don't close the period until you're done with the month. Totally done. And then you print your reports before, like, so you do your bank rec, you do your journal entries, print your reports, close your month. Okay? Any questions on any of that before we move on? Are you all still hanging with me? The afternoon, accounting, we're good? You look like you are. Some of you look super intense in your database too right now. We're doing great on time. I am super excited about that. Let's talk real quick about accounts payable. Okay? Paying our bills. The very first thing in accounts payable that you really want to do is create your vendor records. Okay? You simply go up to Program, Payables, and Vendor Records. So you want to create these. These are the people that you're going to pay your check, write your checks to, or do your auto draws. And it's just like anything else. You just click Add, and you add this information here. So we'll add I can't even think of one, guys. Ohio Edison, why not? I can remember that. The code, it's whatever you want. They default it to these few things. You can change it to be whatever you want it to be. If you have a contact name for the vendor, you can put it in there. In this case, we don't, because it's just a utility. Same with all that. But I do have the address. And if you have a phone number, email, any information that you have. If you have an account number, you can put the account number. And you can tell it if you want it to print that on the check memo line, you can do so. Okay? In this case, it would be the same expense number every time I write this check, because it's the Ohio Edison. I'm not changing that account number. It's the same. Another shortcut that you can do for time saver is you can click this and you can choose what account number you want this to come out of. Housing's getting slammed today. And it will always, when you go to create the invoice, it'll automatically throw that account number in there for you. If it needs to be different, you can override it just by simply clicking in there and choosing the new account number. Okay? I also want to talk, though, real quick about a couple of other things on here. Link to address record. It is not required, but if you've got it for like a person that you have in your system, like, you know, or things like that, and you want to make sure the address always stays current, if you click link to address record, I see some people laughing about this one. Definitely has happened, I'm sure. It's going to pop up the window, okay, what address record do you want it connected to? And you can choose something. And it's going to put their information in here. Why is this important? Anybody want to guess? Yeah, you mailed the check to the wrong place. Because they, you know, Joe moved. They've got Joe moved in the address record window. I print Joe his check because he came and did some more contracting work for us. His check came back. I look, I didn't make the change in the vendor record for Joe. But if I link it to the address record, when my secretary changes Joe's address in the system, guess what? It's changed here. If for some reason I know that Joe changed his address record, when I go in here, I can't make the change here, but I can click on the address button and it'll jump me to Joe's address record. Let's refresh it. Oh, ow. Vendor. So it should have the address thing and jump you to it. It's hard to know if it's from the test database or it's a bug. We're just going to put it up and let them sort through it. So it's important. The same as with receivables. You want to be able to do that too. You can make it inactive. And so then just like do not print, by default, it inactivates it. It's there. We filter it out. You can come right back in here and mark it as active by unchecking that box. If you accrue, we are not going to go in depth with accruals. This is its own monster in a great way that can, we're going to touch on it, but for the sake of time, we're not going in depth with that today. If you have any questions, you want to go further in depth with it, you can definitely ask us. We are more than happy to help you and give you more information on it. I will show you how to do accrue, but I'm just not going to go super in depth that, we really could do with that. But let's say you have people that carry, you have 4 different credit cards floating around out there, and you get one bill for the credit card. You can do a couple of things. You can have where you put all the invoices to that credit card and you just put in the description what it was for. Or if you're wanting to know how much they spent at Sam's Club, how much you spent, on Amazon, or how much was spent here, you could create Sam's Club vendor, Amazon vendor, and so on. You could do that. And then when they turn in their receipts for Amazon, or something like that, and it's a credit card, you can accrue it to that credit card so that it still tells you how much was paid to Amazon, but then it gets paid. It's its own, this is when I say it's its own monster. It can be great. Really can be when it's needed. Do you need to know how much they spent at Sam's Club? I have an expense number for at Sam's Club. They could have bought things for cleaning, and bought things for camp, and bought things, you see what I mean? So you could use an expense number for that. We don't do it the way where we accrue it to a credit card like that. Is it wrong? There are multiple ways to do things. We have churches that do this on a massive scale, and it's great. But if you do want it to go to a credit card, you can mark this, and so then what you're going to do is say that I'm going to pay it as a credit card. Okay, well, what charge do you want it to go to? What liability? Well, we'll do the office credit card account. Okay? I can tell I'm blowing some minds on this one, like, wait, what? Hang tight with me, guys. Another thing, Ohio Edison was a horrible thing to choose, but let's just keep going. What if you got people who need to get a 1099 at the end of the year? You go to do your 1099s, they don't show up. If they've been paid over $600 that year, check and make sure that they're actually marked to receive a 1099. And, the IRS has re-implemented the 1099 NEC instead of putting everything under 1099 miscellaneous because they love us. So you can put their ID or social security number, whatever you need to, right in here, and that will print on the 1099. Okay? If it's got with purchase orders, we won't go into that as much. You guys don't do much with those as far as keeping inventory of some things. If you've created invoices for them, actually, let's just go to somebody that does. Past invoices that you've ever created for a vendor is going to show up under this invoice tab. Now, that being said, if you were to void a check that was paid from the invoice at the same time, because you get rid of the check, you don't need that check anymore. Okay? So voiding a check does not put the invoice back in so you can pay it, no matter what. So if you need to redo something, you'll have to redo that invoice. So always think about that. I've had people, it was there tons of lines, and they needed to void it, and they didn't want to have to recreate that invoice. You might want to look at another way. Do you just need to change the check number, and then reprint the check? Sometimes it's faster to do that kind of workaround than it is to create that massive invoice. It's because it does not put the invoice back into the system when you do it. But on this invoice, you can see what they did. You can see what it was, account number it was written to, and what for, and all of that. Payments is very similar. It gives you the list of all of the checks or auto draws or just payments in general that have been written against it, and the account numbers and everything. If you want to see them, you can double click and it pulls up the ledger entry that particular payment was against. It can do the same for invoices. Years ago, you couldn't see the invoices. They kind of like were hidden away. They've exposed it so you can see them. So if you double click on an old invoice, it will pull up in the invoice record window and tell you it's been paid against. So if you ever did need that, you do have access to that now. I feel like I'm going at rapid speed. Let's go to our recurring transactions. Very similar to what we did with ledger entries, but we don't have a separate window. It's just a tab because I'm creating recurring for a specific vendor. I want to pay this vendor at a certain day every month. So you would just put in what day of the month you want, the description, and fill it out. Add transaction. So I'm going to do the 5th. Testing 1, 2. And notice that automatically filled in because I had that as a default account, right? And then I can put in a description that I might want in it. I can do that. Now it's giving me the invoice automatically. This again, if you have something that's got multiple invoices or multiple lines, you can do that so you don't have to repeat the bill every time, but you can edit the amount once you create the invoice. See this checkbox? This tells me that this person is a 1099 vendor and will get a 1099 if I've paid them more than $600 that year. Speaking of 1099s, because you have the 1099 NEC checked on here, there are some things that you can fill out. Limit to payer, and what name do you want it to display. If I was to change this to 1099 miscellaneous, my setup changes a little bit because on the miscellaneous form it looks a little different. Without going into all the tax stuff, if you just look at a 1099 miscellaneous form, that's for rents, royalties, other income, different things like that. Okay? If I was to do, it's for Windows only, the INT. So NEC is non-employee compensation. Best way to keep that in mind, non-employee compensation. And then, of course, we have our user fields and connections, same thing that we've been talking about this week. Any questions on setting up vendors, recurring entries? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Question is there a way to merge vendors? Yes, there is. Anybody have about 5 of them they need to merge? So you go up to File, go down to Utilities. That tea has ginger in it. It's been sitting for I don't know how many hours. I felt the ginger going down my throat. In Utilities, there is Merge Vendors. If you click Run Special Function, you get this beautiful window that you want to vendor to transfer from and vendor to transfer to. So you just select your vendor. Make sure they're named differently so you know which one's which. You just choose your vendor. So I don't want this one anymore. I want to move it to this gas company. Let me zoom in to make sure. Okay? Everything merges right into it. It's a beautiful thing. So when I click OK, it says move all AP and ledger transactions from Acme Construction Company to A&M Gas Company. And you click yes, and it does its magic. Great question. And it's complete. Good question. Any other questions regarding this with vendors? Let's make a payment. So if I wanted to make a payment from my recurring, I can go create recurring transaction. When I click on the create recurring transaction, there's my, just like the ledger, the windows look the same in the sense of your day and your vendor, the month here, and all that. So I'm going to click on this. If I needed to make a change to this particular invoice, and it shows up, it's not, why? I could make the change when it shows up. Let's move it to November and see if maybe that's, yes. There we go. Set transaction date. Okay. And there's my line. I make my change just like the ledger. It's all identical. But instead of creating a ledger entry, it's creating the invoice. Would you like to view the invoice? Sure, we're going to go there anyways. Okay, so it just creates it for you. It's just a time saver if you have stuff that has a lot of line items. Okay? However, when I go to pay bills, remember I was saying if I do things automatically, print that out, stick it with my bills? Yes, you can make a check and write a check straight in the ledger. You can reprint the check or print a check from the ledger and it not mess up your books at all. You know, if you need a copy of the check, you can find it in the ledger, hit print check, it prints great. You can manually hit add check and type that stuff in, save it, print check, stick it in there, print it, go to the next bill. Or you could list all of your invoices at once, mark them all at once, stick them all in the printer at once, and it does it all for you at once. Time saver. If you're doing one check, this isn't a time saver because it's a lot of steps. Because if I'm doing one check to create the invoice, mark the invoice to be paid, go to the print checks, write checks window, and then post it. Now I've got 4 steps for one check. Or I can go to the ledger, put it in, hit save, and hit print check. But I have multiple checks I want to do. To do that, it's going to be a time saver for here. So ultimately, it's the same end results, but the process is faster in here. So all you do is just fill it out. If you know the vendor's name, like we'll do another Ohio Edison, I can type in Ohio. Or I can type in AC, and it gives me any vendor that has AC in it. If I type in A, it can give me a list of every vendor record that has an A in it. And then I can choose the vendor that I want it to be. Put in my amount, put in my date. If there's an invoice number, type that in. And just fill the info out. What am I doing? Okay? And then hit save. And then you can continue and add more. We're going to add, because I'm not sure all that's in there, so let's do one more. And let me show. We'll just do those. All right. I really want to just cancel. There we go. All right. So I've added these in. You can add these throughout the week. If you have one day a week that you pay bills, you can add these as the week goes. And then it's going to build up in the list. When it's time to pay the bills, you can go and you see them all right there. Or you can sit down that day and put them all in. If they did mobile receipts, which we're going to display tomorrow, mobile receipts, it'll create that invoice record for you. And depending on how you have it set up, it can go ahead and mark it as to be paid by credit card or mark it to be paid by check. It's your call if you want to do that. If you have them do that and you need to make a change because they chose the wrong expense number, then you have to go into mark invoices, unselect it, and then go make the change. I just have them create the invoice because it's inevitable. I got to change something. So it's just a time saver thing. But we'll display that tomorrow. So I'm done. I want to go and mark my invoices to be paid. You can click mark, or you can go up to program and mark invoices to pay. If I want to mark them as check, auto draw, or none, what account number do I want, and so on. If you click mark, you get that option. If you just go to program mark invoices to pay, then you don't have that option. It just opens this window up for you. I'm going to deselect these. Now, this is a list of all of the invoices that are in the system that have not been paid yet. All of them. In other words, they haven't paid the Clark County Treasurer from payroll since August of 2017, but it's just randomized in here. So it tells me I haven't done that. You can't delete these because they came from payroll. So we have to deal with that differently. We won't go there today. So I'm going to mark it. If it's a blue check mark, it's going to give me a check. If I do it for a credit card, it's going to accrue it to Chase Bank. If I need it to go to a different credit card account, I can see here, and these are those credit cards that we in those vendors we have marked as credit card, like I just did for Ohio Edison. To show you how that works, we're going to mark a couple for that, okay? So we got those two vendors are going to be paid by credit card. In other words, they used a credit card for this, and I want you to put them all to the Ohio Edison credit card, because I'm going to go and pay the Ohio Edison credit card when that bill comes in. Okay? If I do auto draw, it's green, it's just going to print on a piece of paper. Looks like a check, or however you have it set, whatever format. But then it doesn't take one of your check numbers. Okay? When you have all those done, down here at the bottom, it tells you how much. So I have $300 marked for auto draw, $706 marked for credit card, and $1,000 for checks that I'm getting ready to print. Click Save. It's going to ask me if I want to go to the right checks window. Click Yes, and it opens it up. Here's the thing with this. Notice auto draw is kind of slapped down there in the middle, right? When I go to print these checks, it's going to print all of your checks first. Then it will print your auto draws. So don't panic and feel like you have to put a single sheet of paper in between check number 13 and check number 14. You don't. It will print all of the checks, and then it will print your auto draw. If your starting check number isn't right and you need to change it on the fly, you can simply click that and just change it to whatever it needs to be, and it's going to adjust the check numbers accordingly. Notice the memo lines. Remember, we put that Ohio Edison number right in there, our account number, and I told it I want it to print on the memo line. That's where it is. Okay. Any questions? When you print the checks, when it's done printing, there's my auto draw. See how it's asking me now? It's ready to print my auto draws. When it's done, then it will go and ask you if you want it to post. And posting takes it where? to the ledger so that it shows up when you go to do your bank rec. So you say, yes, I want to post. Here's not my final posting report. This is the preliminary. See right here? It's not there. Down here, you got to post and then print it. So it's giving you, here are the things we're going to post. If you said to not post this, and then you wanted to do other checks, when you go to post those checks, it's going to give you every check that you've printed that has not been posted yet. It's going to put them all together. So if you did checks yesterday, and then, well, we did close that, didn't we? So we won't be posting today. But notice you can't mark it in there. But if I did checks yesterday, and I did checks today, and I didn't post yesterday's, but I want to go and post, it will merge yesterday's and today's checks in the posting report, okay? Now, let's look real quick, though, because while we did that, notice, first of all, that it's telling you now on the invoice that it's been paid, so you can't do anything with it. But let's see what happens with a credit card. Because we marked it paid for credit card, people have been putting in their receipts, and I have them marked for credit card. So now I need to come and take care of this because my bill is coming. I'm going to mark somebody else's receipt here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Hopefully the date isn't in a closed period. It would be me that would happen again too. So when it does this, it's going to show over in the accrued. Wait, that's why. Let's just get newer ones. That's why it's all still hanging in there. Hang tight, guys. It's because I have those 2017 things in here, and it is just not liking me. That one's good. Let's go find something newer. This is opened. This is opened. And let's do this one. Okay. Let's do this again. Third time's a charm. None of these are dated for 2017. Post. Yes. Why didn't it take me to the right checks window while it's doing this? Anybody want to give a guess why I didn't get the right checks window? Only got post? Because I'm not making the payment yet, right? What I'm telling the system is these invoices, these receipts, I'm going to be paying them with my credit card bill. They're going to show up on my credit card bill. So right now, but I want them to be in the ledger for the day that they got it. Because I get my credit card bill, in 4 weeks. I want to know, or some people, I know the one church I worked for, their credit card came in the middle of the month. So they kind of had this half-month thing. So they would accrue because I want to know that they purchased this and this month and this month, but my bill, I'm going to pay it when the bill comes. So they put it in for that date. They use the mobile receipts, and it goes in there. I'm going to pay it by credit card. It then goes in and it accrues it. I haven't paid it yet. Do you remember on the balance sheet, we had that accrued liabilities that said credit card payments or something? It's a liability. It's a liability because I owe it still to people, but I haven't paid it yet. Show you what I mean. Other office credit cards is what I have it assigned to. It's really low. Sorry, guys. Office credit cards up there at the top. That's what I have it assigned to. So it used the expense number. That way it's expense for the time that it got purchased. That instead of coming out of my checking account, It's going into my liability account on hold until I'm ready to pay it. Then when I pay it, it'll leave my liability account and leave my checking account. But my expense number was expensed at the time that I did it. Does that make a little bit more sense, thinking of it that way? So it's sitting in there. It will sit in there until I make the payment. So when you go in to the Mark Invoices to Pay, there's a tab that says Accrued Invoices. We did this to Ohio Edison right down here. You can mark it just like you would any other invoice. You can mark it as for a check, credit card, or auto draw. Okay? If you aren't going to pay it in full, let me clear this out. If you're not going to pay it in full, you just want to pay a specific amount, you can do a couple of things. You could sit and just say, I want to pay $600 towards this one, and we're only going to put, $1,000 on this one. The balance of my accrued invoices for these credit cards is going to drop by this amount. Okay? If you want to pay specific line items, you can click this little thing and it shows you the invoices that you made that you had accrued to it. And you can just select those. By default, what it does is because I told it $600, it took the oldest, cleared those out, and then put the remaining balance on the newest invoice. Okay? In the end, though, it really doesn't ultimately matter. We have ladies who go line by line and check it, and do it. Have at it. It's not necessary. You really can just put however much you're going to pay on that because you've already taken care of that with your expense, right? So you can do it like that. So then when you do this, it just writes the check. It goes out of our liability account that we have. Now you're going to see, you ready to write the check? Yep. Because now I'm ready to take it out of my checking account. I'm not putting it in holding. I'm done with it being accrued. Now you go to write the checks, and you'll watch when we go back into it, I'm not going to post this because the church furnishing thing up there, I'm not really sure what that invoice date is, and we are bound to get it's an enclosed period message. So we're not going to post that. But if I go back in, you'll see that my balance for the accrued invoices is much lower. So I don't owe them as much anymore because I've paid it. Does that make sense? Kinda. One of the hardest things in payables that I've noticed for people is accrued. Actually, it seems like across the board because I usually get Jen, I'm getting ready to take an accrued call, just be on standby because I'm not sure. Because it can get confusing, but it really isn't. You do not have to accrue anything. You've got your credit card bill and you just want to list all the line items in that invoice, have at it. There is nothing wrong with that. There are churches that do that more often than you realize. But if you want to use something like mobile receipts, and they're loading it up throughout the month, you might want to have it accrued. So let me ask this question. You use mobile receipts very actively. What do you do? Do you accrue them all, or do you leave them and just merge it all together? You like this option better?
I do because you can because when I have to print out a report for each of the departments or even for my bishop, it's posted to the ledger and he already knows what's spent, even though it's not maybe out of the checking account, but he can see on the balance sheet what's not there.
Yeah, so the biggest positive thing, just like she's saying, she doesn't do accrues. Right now, she does it, saves it, pays it all, marks them all, and pays them all at the same time when she gets her credit card bill. That is not wrong to do. You absolutely can do it. But like she said, what she likes about doing it this way, now that we've shown her, when she accrues the receipts as they submit those receipts through mobile receipts, when she accrues it, it's getting dated for whenever it was done. So when she prints the report for her overseer or director, it's dated for the time that they purchased that item or what have you. That's why people do use this. It's not that accruals are unforgiving. There are ways to back them out. If needed, you can void. It just voids it all back. But, I mean, you can get pretty in-depth with this as far as how you do it. We have people that have their own credit card, and then they accrue the accrued. I mean, it's something else. The lady showed me, she found the workaround, and I'm like, first of all, that is impressive. I am queen of workarounds. That was impressive. You can do that if you want to, because she wanted to keep track of each member's card. So she wanted the staff members' cards and all of that, so she would accrue that all again then together and make the payment. So it can be done. There are ways you can do it. Or you can have, when they do receipts, and we show you tomorrow, they can have probably like what I'm assuming you do, they always choose their credit card as the vendor. They don't have Sam's Club, Walmart, things like that as their vendor. It's their credit card, which is a lot easier when you do it that way in this scenario. Okay? Any other questions on accruals? Yes.
I'm seeing this, and we're also event-oriented, and unfortunately, my credit card doesn't match the same time frame as the event. So I can see where the accrued would help. Like, we just did an event in August. Well, you don't get the bills until the next fiscal year.
Right.
So by accruing them, they're gonna hit the same month as the event.
Exactly.
Camp meeting does the same thing. You know, we had camp meeting in June, but all the bills hit in July and sometimes August.
Right.
So this will pull all of them into the month of the event so that you have a clearer understanding. Because my counselor always like, why is there, the expense for camp meeting is here, but there's no income.
Yes, that's a great thing. What she's saying is she can see how helpful this can be. Take camp meeting time. You're using the credit card during camp meeting, but you get your bill in July or August for those things. And so to be able to use this accrual so that you can expend in June or July or whenever your camp meeting is, but then pay it when the bill comes, now she can show the council, yeah, we've expensed it here when the income is, because the question they had is a great question. Why do I see all these expenses, but I don't see the income for it? It's because the income was for back in June, but you expensed it there in August. That is a great reason you want to use the accrual, are for things like that. And it's not hard, guys. If you can get your receipts at the time, it's not hard. Let's just word it that way. Great question. So the question is, when I go to accrue, and it posts that, to the ledger, like I said, pay by credit card, and it posts to the ledger, does it do it by the date of the invoice, or does it do it by the date it's accrued? It should do it by the date of the invoice. You had a question? Somebody?
Does it take that off of your cash balance, or do you have to do something? Yeah.
Great question. So does it take it off your cash balance, or do you have to do something? What it does is it doesn't touch your checking account because you haven't written the check yet. It out of the expense, and then it puts it into that liability like it does your payroll taxes. So it holds it there. Then when you make your payment, it takes it out of that and out of your checking account at that point. Okay? Great questions for this. I can tell, has anybody ever used the accrual? You use it? Huh? You did use it. One uses it. This would help you guys a bunch. I don't think Northern Ohio did either. I could be wrong. I wasn't taught. Might have a little bit, but not very much. So this is great. If you have any other questions with it, if it doesn't seem to work right or you're struggling with something, reach out to support. They're happy to help you. They love working with accruals. You can tell them, hey, Jen told me the support team loves to help with accruals, so I'm calling for help. It is. That and receivables, they're like, it's like the plague. All right, we have, yes, ma'am.
Jennifer, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And I just need to be told it's not possible, and I'll move on, and I'll.
So it's not possible.
Before the last update, I believe the major update last year, a couple of things. When we were paying invoices, when you're in there paying them, you know the little truck
Yes.
that you can look at? Okay, before, when you clicked that area, it just kept it over here for you. So you could see, it doesn't do that now. You have to click on the truck, and then if you change to your next vendor and entering it, it doesn't change over there to the new vendor. It's still got your old vendor over there.
Okay, are you talking about the miscellaneous vendors? Just vendors.
I'm talking about if you're in accounts payable, right there, and when you enter something, like you pull a vendor up in there, and then your little truck there, and then it shows you your past invoices and stuff if you had to look back right then.
Okay.
Okay, so that window's open there in the background. Now you're changing vendors because you've already paid that one. That window is not changing.
Right.
for vendors.
Right. It won't change. That's aggravating. So the thing is, when I create an invoice and I put in a vendor and I click the little truck, which opens up the vendor record so I can see the past invoices. I go back into my vendor invoice records, change my vendor. It's not changing the vendor record to that. That would be expected results. So you would want it to stay in connection with what you're doing.
It used to be, it was a little setup was a little different, but when you changed vendor, your other changed with.
But if you click the truck, it will change to it. Yeah, that definitely is expected results. I could put a story up to ask if it will stay in sync. Like if you change the vendor, it automatically does it.
And then I got one more question.
Fire away.
Paying invoices again. So when you're over there in invoice records, and I'm going to use Randy's example earlier when he was talking about when you have to go up to program or reports and you're doing all this clicking
Mm-hmm.
that we don't like to do, so we want less clicks. So if you're over there and paying invoices, and you gotta look, now I don't know how everybody else is, but I'm gonna use our state council for an example. Sometimes they might get an honorarium that it's not it is taxable, but then they get an expense check that's not. Okay, before the new update, you could easily see that 1099 thing right there. You have to click now.
This here?
Very annoying, yeah. You can't tell that that's already, it clicked or not right there. You know what I'm trying to say? You gotta go in and unclick it if it's not an
Okay, I know exactly what you're saying. So the thing is, if I have a 1099 vendor that is getting reimbursed, so it's not for 1099s. If I'm understanding you right, you're saying you can't undo this 1099 thing.
You have to click to see it, and then you have to unclick it because it's not gonna
Click to
be-
see what?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's the 1099, right?
Right, we know this is a 1099, correct.
But to uncheck that because it's not
Okay.
taxable to them.
Right.
You gotta click it, click the button, click again. There's 3 or 4 clicks there that's unnecessary.
Okay, so if this line item isn't for 1099, where before was a checkbox, here you click this settings and you uncheck it and click OK. And that is an update. That's an enhancement that they've done. If it needs to be 1099, you can do it and check it here and do it that way. So the check box is just not right there. So I see what you're saying is less. It was less clicks than what it used to be.
A lot less clicks. I mean, I'm like you, I'm all about clicks.
Yeah. Yeah. I see what you're saying. So yeah, that is an enhancement that they did, when they did it. That's why you don't see that checkbox with it, and that's because you can choose 1099, 941. Say it was one of those, you can uncheck that, and then you do it. The nice thing too, though, while I'm on this window, it does tell you when that was entered and when it was modified. Obviously, we don't have a date here because I haven't saved anything, but yeah, that is a change in the update that was on purpose. I doubt I'll be able to convince them to change it otherwise.
Probably not, because I've asked a number of times.
Then I can So if you've asked a number of times, I guarantee you have more pull than me.
It's been asked a number.
I get it. Sometimes some changes, can be a little challenging at times. But that's a good questions. Those are great questions to ask. Any other real quick? All right. We have a couple minutes. I want to talk what I can and loosely touch on reports. We will do payroll in the morning because first of all, there's no way. I'm not going to go into super detail with it, but we do need to talk about payroll a little bit. Second, you guys will be asleep by the time we're done with it. Might as well put you to sleep in the morning because we're all tired then too. But we'll start that. But I do want to touch real quick on some of the accounting reports. And if you have more questions about some of the reports, definitely ask. I'm happy to show some of those tomorrow too. But I did want to there's a couple I really wanted to touch on. One, if you have a question on why does my fund have this balance that it has, what makes it have that balance? The best report, in my opinion, is to start in troubleshooting is what's called a fund activity report. The fund activity report, and we'll do receivables tomorrow too. The fund activity report, let me back it up a second. If you print an income and expense report for the month of, let's say, October, that's what we were working on earlier. If I'm printing an income and expense report for the month of October, I look at the over and under. Then I print my balance sheet, and it doesn't balance with what my report is. Why would that happen? Why wouldn't that? I print my balance sheet for October 31st. That should match my income and expense report because that's everything I've done. Don't forget, you have carryover from all the months prior, right? Yeah, but I did it for January 1st. I did the income and expense report for January 1st through January 31st, and it's still not matching. You have a beginning balance. It's carried over from the prior year, right? So that's one reason. If you want to know why your fund has a certain amount in it, because you can't seem to figure it out, it shouldn't have that amount. I don't know why. Fund activity report's a great way to see it. Couple things with it. When it says from, it's only going to give you the options for your closed periods. Okay? So why don't I see 2023 in here? Well, if you remember when we went to the closed open periods, 2023 is wide open. It doesn't exist. And in 22, I've only closed the month of January with it. And so that's why. We'll use January of 22, and I'm going to run it to October 31st to see why. I want to see, though, a fund. Now, I could go in here and choose these funds myself, but what if I miss one account number when I manually select it like this? it's going to throw that report off, and I'm still not going to balance with the fund, right? What would be the better way to get your funds? We've talked about it a little bit. The account browser. And you want to change, not do it by category like we've been. We want to do it by fund balance because I want to know why my fund has this amount in it. And so I set it for fund balance. All I have to do is put the X in this box, and it's highlighted. All of my funds, even my inactive ones, we just don't have any in this database, but even my inactive ones, because if they've been used, they affect that fund. So with all of those selected, I click OK. This report has some options. You can do composite. Composite is very simple. It's composite. It's going to give you your income, the name of, oh, I have my little logo in there. It has just simple things. Doesn't have breakdowns. It's just my categories. Personnel, administrative, Christian education. See how it works? That's what composite is. But here's what's beautiful. Look at what my starting balance was for that fund. It was this. So if I was to just take the income and the expense, it would say that my balance for this fund for October 31st would be $64,000, but it's not, is it? If you remember, we'll print this report. Come on, Jennifer. October 31st. So when we print this, my general fund has $62,000. Why is that? Well, that's because we started $1,800 in the red. So if you print your just income and expense reports, it's one way to definitely panic and wonder why. This, though, is one of the best reports for this because it shows your beginning balance. The other thing it shows, remember we've been talking about fund-to-fund transfers? We've transferred out some money today, and this has some other transfers in it. Transfer in and transfer out, that's when you've used your fund number. And in the case of this database, we use those 3,000 numbers. That's why it's showing transfer in and transfer out. So it takes all that activity for that fund and puts it on one report. Well, what is this transfer in and transfer out? Where did that come from? We know I've used the 3,000 number, but why did I transfer out that much money? Well, I can do like we were talking earlier, and I can run a ledger by accounts report. It's my favorite one. I'm sure there are others, but you want to do it for the same date range. So 1/1/22. And I only want it for the 3,000 number. I don't need it for everything connected to it. I need to know when they used 3,000 because that's the number that brought it to be the transfer in or transfer out. So when I see that, there are my transfers. So usually what I do when I'm asked about these funds and why they have that balance, I print a fund activity report. If it has transfer in, transfer out, I print the ledger by accounts report for that fund number, and then it's good. Now, the other thing with the fund activity, you can have it detail, and detail gives you the account number and how much was used for the account number. If you do detailed transactions, it's even more. It's every transaction underneath that account number. All the line items. So if you were needing to find a needle in a haystack, this is the best way to do it. Just know every single line item for that account number. So if you do all accounts, just going to be a lot. Another one is your trial balance. Trial balance is great, especially to see if you've got something that might be out of balance, seems a little wonky. Trial balance is great. It looks just like a posting report. It has all that information in there. Here's the thing to keep in mind about a trial balance report. It's everything. It's going to show you all the activity, very similar to, it's not line by line. Well, kind of. Let me show you. Trial balance reports. You choose all accounts. Sure, why not? It's a lot. You can choose, too, to do it by date or by reference number. I personally like the reference number because then, remember how I said you can't reprint the posting report? This looks very similar. The thing with the trial balance, too, is it's got the cleared on it. It is a very long report. We'll end with a funny story because I can show you more reports even tomorrow. We had an overseer. I loved him. He was awesome. First day in, came from a very small mission state. So he came in and he was like, hey, I want to get a great idea of where we are financially. And, we're like, absolutely. Let's give you some reports. Oh, no, I know exactly what report I want. I want a trial balance report. And she's like, okay, I'll get you one for like the last month. No, let me have it for like the last 2 years so I can get it done. And she was like, two years? He's like, yeah, so I can get it great. She's like, okay, no problem. Went and got it. It was almost 2 reams of paper. She just set it on his desk. I mean, that's what he asked for, right? He looked at her. It wasn't 5 minutes. He went back into her office. I'm busting up because I'm like, dude, I just kept seeing her walk. I'm like, what is she doing? She just kept getting more paper. He was like, I will never ask for that again. He was like, do you have something that's a little less conducive? She was like, sure. So you want to watch. There are reports like this. Fund activity is great, but if you do detailed transactions, you want to watch. It's large. Ledger by accounts is another one. It's all the line items for everything. If you do all accounts, ledger by accounts has all of your balance sheet accounts, all of your fund liabilities, assets, income, and expense. It's a very large report. Great reports, though, for finding needle in haystacks, for not knowing why it's certain things are this way. You can look and see maybe what's messed up. We're going to pause there. We'll do the payroll in the morning. We'll do that. If there are questions with certain reports, I'll touch on it. I'll show you in our manual. We have a great page that you can print out that lists, and I'll show it to you tomorrow. It lists all of the different reports and what those reports do. Beautiful list.